It was Easter Sunday, and the minister had gathered the children of the church at the front of the sanctuary for the big children's message. "Happy Easter," he said to them. "Can someone tell me what we celebrate on Easter? What's it about?" And one girl spoke up quickly. "It's about remembering our mothers and how much we love them." "Well," the minister said, it's great to remember our mothers, but I believe you're thinking of Mother's Day." Another hand went up, this time an eager little boy. "Is it the time when we say thank you to God for the good things we have in our lives?" "Well," the minister said, "it's always good to be thankful for our blessings, but I think you're thinking of Thanksgiving, not Easter." And so the minister was starting to feel disheartened that none of the children knew what Easter was about. Easter! And then finally, after an awkward silence, a little girl in a fancy dress stood up and said, "Easter is the day when we remember that Jesus died on the cross, was buried in a tomb, and then God rolled away the stone and Jesus came out of the tomb." And the minister said, yes, that's it, you got it." She continued, "Then Jesus looked and saw his shadow." So he went back into the tomb, and there were 6 more weeks of winter. Wow, I almost didn't tell that one because it's been around for about 50 years. It has been told many times, but I had to tell it, of course, today because it is Groundhog Day. It also, of course, happens to be Super Bowl Sunday, and our numerical genius over here, Iris Dayob, reminded me that today is a rare 8-digit palindrome, the only one of its kind this century. A palindrome is a sequence of numbers that read the same forward as they read backwards. Today's date is 02/02/2020. Isn't that cool? And you were here at church for this momentous occasion. I'm a great big fan of the 1993 classic film Groundhog Day. It stars Bill Murray as a cynical, negative, obnoxious weatherman named Pat Prokop. Oh, I'm sorry. Anytime I just hear weatherman, I think of Pat. Phil Connors, a different P. Phil Connors. And since today is actually Groundhog Day and Super Bowl Sunday, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Bill Murray in a Super Bowl commercial tonight. I'd put a bet on it. You know that advertisers are not going to miss that marketing opportunity. Well, weatherman Phil Connors is irritated that he has been assigned to cover the annual Groundhog Day event in a small town in Pennsylvania. Phil has had to cover the event on February 2nd for several years in a row and is fed up with the small town mentality and the hicks that live there. He can't wait to get the assignment over, though one gets a sense that Phil would not be happy with any assignment. He's self-centered and always focuses on the faults of other people. After driving to the town, he stays the night in a bed and breakfast. He wakes up the next morning at 6 a.m. with his clock alarm playing Sonny and Cher's "I Got You, Babe." He gets out of bed, has breakfast, goes to do the report, and half-heartedly tapes the Groundhog Day event and wants to hurry back to Pittsburgh. But there's a big snowstorm coming, and Phil is forced to stay in town for one more night. And so after a day of insulting the town and its citizens, he goes back to the bed and breakfast for one more night. When he wakes up the next morning at 6 a.m., Ironically, his clock alarm is again playing Sonny and Cher's "I Got You, Babe." Isn't that a coincidence? And then the very same things happened the day before. In fact, it is Groundhog Day all over again. Phil is reliving the day, but at first he thinks it's a dream. But then the same thing happens the next day, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. Phil is not only trapped in the town, he's trapped in the same day, living Groundhog Day over and over and over again. He's caught in a time loop, and he can't change it. He even tries to commit suicide many times, so things will change, but he always wakes up at 6 a.m. on Groundhog Day. This goes on for a long time. No one knows for sure how long. Some people who try to figure out these kinds of things believe it was around 12,395 days, or 33 years in 350 days. I bet you didn't know that. It takes a while, obviously, for this to happen, but sometime in those 33 years, Phil realizes that all of the negative things he thinks about people and does to people aren't making his life or the situations any better. And so he eventually decides to use his knowledge of the day's events to better himself and the people and lives around him. For instance, since he knows that a waiter is about to drop a tray of dishes, because he does it the same day, same time, every day, Phil does something to prevent it from happening and helps the waiter. Instead of avoiding people, he starts embracing them and making the most of the moment. He starts hearing their stories and learning things about them. And he comes to understand the people in the town and value them. And so when he now does his news report on the Groundhog Day event, Phil takes it seriously now and makes it a very touching and meaningful experience. And he also learns that he is not able to keep a homeless man from dying, no matter what he tries to do to help him. So in other words, the day and its experiences become life lessons for Phil. And before our eyes, we see Phil turn into a kind-hearted, sentimental person. We see human transformation. Now, don't you wish there were times we could get caught up in a time loop? On a day when you said something to someone or wrote an email to someone that you wished you had never said or written. You wish you could take the words back or at least say them differently. Don't you wish you could live that day over knowing what you know now? Or the day you gave a lousy interview for that new job, or the day you got in that car accident, or the day you slipped with the addiction after being sober for 3 years. Wouldn't it be great having the chance to relive the day knowing what you know now? Life would sure be less painful. And yet, without the painful experiences, Phil would have never been transformed. We can't, of course, relive a day, but we can still learn from each day and try to live better the next. John Wesley called this process sanctification. It's really a fancy word for what Phil Connors did and what John Wesley did. For you see, on February 6, 4 days from today, but back in 1736, on February 6th, John Wesley first stepped onto American soil. It happened right over there at Cockspur Island, right by Fort Pulaski. You ought to go over there sometime and see the little monument. and thus began John's ventures in Savannah. As most of you know, many things did not go well for him here. He seemed a bit arrogant, egotistical, too sure of himself, which is often, of course, a cover for someone who is insecure. He left Savannah to go back to England feeling like a failure. But these painful experiences helped him learn and grow and become a better person. Became the person who started the Methodist movement and who prevented a civil war in England. Most of the main teachings of Jesus can be found in 3 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 5, 6, and 7. And that whole 3 chapters are often called the Sermon on the Mount. And a section of that Sermon on the Mount is what Steve did for us today, called the Beatitudes. These sayings form the basis of all of Jesus' teachings. And as a child, I thought the Beatitudes were referring to what would happen to us in eternity after we die, but I was also wrong. The Beatitudes are referring to the here and now. They are the ideals and qualities we are to be striving for now. They are basically trying to answer the question, what kind of life does God want people to live? And I'm sorry that I have not preached about the Beatitudes more often in my ministry. We probably should be reciting them every Sunday as we do the Lord's Prayer. We should certainly offer a Bible study course on the Beatitudes periodically. We have to talk about them. We have to learn about them because we are not going to hear them or learn about them anywhere else. Certainly not in our society, because the Beatitudes stand very much in opposition of what our culture and leaders live and promote. Humility is critical to the Beatitudes. Humility is critical for the Christian journey because humility is critical for being open to learning and to growth. It's also about learning to die to ego, to self-centeredness, the process of dying to insecurities and need for power. We saw what can happen when we do that in the lives of Phil Connors and John Wesley. Amazing things can happen when we die to live. To help us move in this direction, I would like to suggest a prayer for you to use in your life. It's simple but powerful. Here are the words, "Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life." Now, those words may be familiar to some of you because we've sung those words in a chant, especially in our Taizé services during Lent. It goes like this: "Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life." Try that with me. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. I want you to saturate yourself with that prayer every day. Sing that in the shower. Sing it as you're getting dressed. Let it be as you breathe. Let it become a part of you. You can say it without the tune, but the tune, for me, helps me. And if you can't remember the tune, look up the sermon. Pat's recording it. Or you can just Google, "Shepherd me, O God," and the tune will come up in YouTube for you. Take this prayer and let it become part of your daily routine. It will change your life. It will lead you from death, holding on to things, to letting go, to life. Now, many of us were in a bit of shock last Sunday when we found out after church that around 1 o'clock, Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, were killed, along with 7 other people, in a helicopter crash in California. I never was a big Kobe fan. He played on the West Coast, and I tend to pull for teams on the East Coast. I also tend to pull for the underdog teams, which would never be Kobe's team. If Kobe was playing, the other team was the underdog. He was that good. He was one of the few basketball players who skipped college, went from high school directly to pro ball. I'm not a big fan of that either, because that's asking a lot of young people who haven't matured. He became, of course, a huge basketball star, and along came a big ego and not treating everyone the way they should be treated. In 2003, Kobe was arrested for sexual assault against a 19-year-old hotel employee. The case was settled privately in a civil lawsuit, and Kobe's reputation was scarred. He lost major endorsements, and he would never be able to be the kind of spokesperson for the NBA that he would have liked to have been. The experience humiliated him and humbled him. All he could do now was put his marriage and family back together, because he was married at the time, and work hard at becoming the best basketball player he could be. And he did. He did both of those things very well. Kobe had another little setback in 2011. While playing in a game, he used a homophobic slur at one of the referees. He was fined $100,000 by the NBA, and he became an example of homophobia. But 2 years later, Kobe was widely praised by the LGBT community for telling a fan on Twitter not to use the word gay as an insult. He tweeted, "Just letting you know that using the word gay as a way to put someone down ain't okay and is not cool. Delete that out of your vocabulary." When another fan suggested that Kobe wasn't in the best position to preach given his history with homophobic slurs, he responded, "Exactly. That wasn't cool and was ignorant on my part. I own it, and I will learn from it and expect the same from others." It was a significant moment for LGBT folks, seeing a major sports figure acknowledge openly that he was wrong for using a homophobic slur, and prove that people really can change and learn from their experiences. And then in 2016, it came time for Kobe to retire from basketball. You know, one of the hardest things for a major star athlete to do is to retire from the sport that gave him his whole star power and recognition. Somehow, Kobe made a smooth transition as he started to really devote his time to his family and to his daughters. He became a basketball coach for them. He especially supported them in all of their athletics, and he became a major spokesman for women's basketball, really standing up, lifting up the role of women and that game in a time where it was kind of, people weren't sure how to support it. In 2018, he won an Oscar for an animated film called Dear Basketball that is based on a poem Kobe wrote about his retirement and what basketball had meant to him starting as a child. This was the first time a professional athlete had ever won an Oscar. Since his death, the outpouring of grief and honors for Kobe, especially from fellow athletes, has been enormous. What has become clear is that these people were not moved to these huge emotions due to Kobe being an incredible competitor on a basketball court. What became clear is what inspired them was by the way he had matured, how he had learned and grown from his mistakes, and how he became an example of how a star player can retire and make a wonderful transition into family life. Kobe's Catholic faith meant a lot to him. I understand that Kobe and Brianna had the Eucharist, Holy Communion, just 2 hours before the crash. And so as we come forward today to receive communion, we are reminded that we don't know how long we have on this planet. But we know that we have now. We have today. And so as we come to God's table, let us remember these words spoken by a Catholic priest. Our life is given back to us with hope. And every day is an opportunity to decide again that this day shall not be like the other. We are reminded that as of this moment, a new person is being created. We are free to live fully in the present. The future is open. Thanks be to God. Shepherd me, O God, beyond my wants, beyond my fears, from death into life. Amen and amen. Will you now turn in your bulletin?